Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Coming up on the Payoff, MJ Gottlieb. Basically, this story was tailor-made for me. We're talking about he was an athlete. He got involved in the rap industry, started an urban clothing brand in New York City, and nationwide that became a huge deal. And by the way, he's an alcoholic and he's an addict and he's sober. I think almost 13, 14 years. And he's got this network. It's a sober network. And we get to that. It's called Lucid, but there's so many other things that he's got going on. But the number one thing he's got going on is that he's carrying hope. And regardless of how interesting he is or charismatic he is, his message is changing lives. And the fact that we get to share it today is awesome. So MJ Gottlieb, folks. But first, Kevin Souza. Are you in New York now?
No, I actually moved down to Florida.
Oh, okay. So when did you move down there?
So I moved down to Florida in 2018, end of 2022. It's funny, I popped up to New York and Philly a bunch because a ton of our shareholders are in Philly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And we're talking about Lucid.
Yes.
Yeah, which is an incredible site that I wish was an app. I wish was around when I first got sober, because it's related to sober dating and a lot of other things, sobriety. And we'll get into that, but I want to get into you first. New York City. Yep. You're born and raised. You were surrounded, you said, by fear, which was instituted by your parents. I can relate a little bit to that, particularly your dad. Talk to us a little bit about your fear growing up and what your childhood was like in New York City, which is an awesome place to grow up, but it also can be a scary place.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so I grew up in New York City, and parents didn't have a lot of money, not a little, kind of like right in the middle, but I was severely overprotected. So it was kind of like that. Don't ask for anything because the person may say no. Don't ask the girl out, or you may say no. Don't try to get on the team because they may not want you to be on their team. And so like I don't, am I allowed to curse here, or
knock yourself out, dude? Okay.
It's hard for a Northeastern boy not to curse. So I was like a little bitch. Like I couldn't open my mouth because I was like afraid of the world. And my father, rest in peace, he used to say before I went out, he used to say, Michael, my name is Michael Jonathan. He says, Michael, remember there are murderers and killers everywhere. So have eyes in back of your head. Have a good night. Like every time when I went out, every time he'd say that same thing. And I'd be like, I'd freeze. And so the muggers would like smell the fear. Right. And that was I couldn't open my mouth. I could not open my mouth. I had such dis-ease inside of me. I couldn't live life, couldn't open my mouth. And I was severely bullied. Yeah.
And to punctuate the situation, you say you had a super popular sister and you felt like you were not popular at all. So it was almost emphasized how unpopular you were by how cool she was.
Yeah. So it's like we shared a room and half the room was blue and half the room was pink. And she had all of her friends in the room. And I had nobody, and I just felt so uncomfortable. And it was just, It was just so bad. And, it's interesting. I've never had any severe trauma per se in my life, in the sense of I work with a lot of kids and they have gone through sexual abuse and various forms of abuse and whatever, prison and all this kind of stuff, right? And so if you look at it on paper, I haven't had that kind of like, oh, wow, right. But like bullying is no joke. Like bullying is no joke. And when I would date women, a couple of women that I dated, their kids were like 5 years old and they were being bullied. And I have a visceral reaction when I see people bullied because I remembered what it did to me.
Yeah. And you talk about the bullying, you talk about the fear that affected pretty much, I can totally relate. Just the fear of rejection, huge one for me. The fear of people telling you no, the fear of not making the team or whatever. But knowing your story, the little bit that I do and doing like the research and reading, it seems like there's three things that saved you or kept you afloat. Basketball, rap music, and alcohol, right?
Yes.
What came first?
Let's see. Alcohol. Yeah.
Which makes sense,
Yeah.
right? Because it opens up, it kind of lowers inhibitions, and now you're throwing yourself into these things that you think a white guy from New York City doesn't have much business getting into the rap game. But you get deep into it as talent, and then also through your clothing line where you were embedded with some of the biggest names in hip hop. When you started to drink, before we get into that, when you started to drink, what happened for you?
Yeah, so I was at a house party when I was, I want to say maybe I was 13, I'm not sure, 14. And someone put a cup in my hand, and after a couple of those cups, this sense of relief came over me. It was like, it was astounding. It was my solution. And suddenly I could open my mouth for the first time. And I was infinitely better looking, or so I thought. And so all the girls wanted me, or so I thought. And I was so much funnier. So, well, I had to be, I couldn't have been less funny because I couldn't have opened my mouth prior. Right. And I found that, and then that was it. That was it. Like from that point forward, I was pretty much a 40s guy. And I would go to the corner of the bodega and drink 40s pretty much from that moment forward.
And then you drink 40s. You talk about drinking 40s before basketball practice, and then going to practice. But you start to evolve as a basketball player, and that is just like the alcohol gives us bullshit self-esteem. Athletics can give us some real self-esteem. So like, take me inside what was happening with you mentally when you're starting to drink, and now all of a sudden you are starting to succeed on the basketball court. Is it affecting you socially? Are you starting to really open up now and become, quote unquote, air quotes, popular?
Well, people had no choice because I think I was the highest point scorer in my school's 200-year history. So they had no choice to not give me respect.
Where'd you go to high school? In the city or outside?
Well, me putting up 200 highest point score in 2 years, it meant nothing because I went to a shit school. Not a shit school like a bad school, but a small school called Friends Seminary, which is on 16th between Rutherford and 3rd. But, I was very similar also to like an Ed Neely. Like I was the bruiser's bruiser. Like I would bang around with motherfuckers that I would always play the guy that was 6'10", like always. And I had so much hatred inside of me. And so I always wanted to take that aggression out somewhere. And that's why I got very good at basketball.
How about like females during this time? Like, cause for me, I didn't talk to a girl. I mean, I'm sure I did, but I always say it, and it's cliche for people to listen to this, or not cliche, but it's just they've heard it before. When I was in 8th grade, I was terrified to go to the dance. And then when I was in 9th grade and I started to drink, I couldn't wait to get there. How did it affect your personal relationships with females?
So I grew up late. So I was still very socially awkward, and then I would drink, and then like when you're on like the fourth drink, or even third drink, you're feeling perfect. But I'd immediately go from 3 quickly into 8, 9, 10, drink number 8, 9, 10, and beyond. And so I never stopped. So at that drink number 3, I normally I'm able to pick up a girl. I'm good. But then I keep drinking, and in about a 40-minute window, I'm a complete mess. I'm punching people. I'm picking fights. I'm putting my hands through windows. I'm weird. I'm like ripping my shirt off, and like
I get it. Yeah.
It's like it was a mess. And so people just would look at me and be like, what are you? Like, what are you? So even going into college, I'd still was having experiences with women. I was getting way too drunk, way too early. And I would wake up and it was bad. It was bad. I kept missing the consciousness. I'd completely missed the consciousness. And then suddenly I'd be arguing with the woman. They wouldn't know what I'm arguing about. Turns out I broke into her friend's apartment. And I don't even remember it. It was bad.
And you kept going though. You managed to be successful. And, again, what's your definition of success? But you get through high school, you go to Colorado to play hoops, you get hurt, but you're still on campus. You're filled with a lot of anger. How did, you playing basketball and then having that taken away from you affect your drinking?
Well, that was it. When I was told that I couldn't play basketball anymore in 2005, when I couldn't really walk much anymore, and I went to hospital for special surgery, and Dr. Deborah St. Fart, she said, "Yeah, we need to take your hip out. I can't believe you're walking with this, let alone playing basketball." And I said, when can I get on the basketball court again? She said, never. So I used to play basketball every night from when I got off work, 6:30 to maybe 10 or 9:30, 6:30 to 9:30 for 3 hours every night at Reebok Sports Club in LA. I mean, it's called Sports Club LA, Reebok Sports Club in New York City. And so suddenly that 6:30 to 9:30 time that I was playing basketball, where I couldn't get in trouble, that whole time was available to me. And I didn't know what to do with that time. And I dedicated all my time to drinking from that point forward in 2005.
So that was my bad though. I jumped us ahead. When you got to college, you go to play basketball, but you don't end up playing. And
correct.
You're a menace to society in Boulder, Colorado. What type of person were you in college? What starts to happen to you? Kind of consequences do you experience?
Well, I got arrested within 4 days of initiation. So before school started, I was arrested. But that one was the only where I was actually doing the right thing. I was drunk, but I was doing the right thing. I went to a party with 2 girls that I met during initiation. I went home. It was at a fraternity party. The girl woke me up at 2 a.m, said one of the girls was being taken advantage of in the basement. So I went over there, and then the guys, started playing games with me. So then I knocked one of them out, and then I turned around and I saw the same dude. So I hit and I knocked him out. And then I turned around and then I saw the same dude. And I paused because I had been drunk. So I was wondering, am I seeing things? And then they all jumped on me and beat the shit out of me. And before you know it, I was in handcuffs. But it turned out they were triplets. But yeah, so I was a mess. And so when I couldn't play ball, and I was told that and I think this is what you were getting at, that I couldn't play ball for the team.
Yeah.
They couldn't let me rehab my ankle. I picked a fight every night. I would go to Tulagis or Taylor's or one of the 2 or 3 main big bars, and I'd pick fights one by one with the University of Colorado basketball team. And so I'd like slap him in the face and wait for him outside, and kind of like that was my thing. And so I was just crazy. It was crazy.
How did you continue to, again, like all this shit's going on, but you managed to talk to me a little bit about your first clothing line, Urban Connections, and how that was sort of locked into the hip hop world. You were an artist, like I'm super interested in that because I love hip hop and I love. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So Urban Connection was our agency later on.
Okay.
The first line was called B&W, Black and White Racial Awareness Wear.
And this is when you were in Colorado?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had been rapping at that time since I was, 15 years old. Right. So I had called my group B&W, standing for Black and White, but the black guy never stayed. Right. So like because my whole thing was promoting race relations and showing that if a black person and a white person could work together. So I was always a good kid wanting the best from the standpoint of race relations and, different civil rights and stuff like that. I was always a good person in that regard. And so we printed up a bunch of shirts. My best friend, Gary, at the time, who happens to be creative and brand director for Lucid now, 35 years later. And we printed up a bunch of shirts, B&W shirts, and we went to play my music in the club in Denver. And nobody wanted to put on the music and everybody wanted the shirts. See, as a white rapper that didn't sound like the Beastie Boys, like if I sounded like the Beastie Boys, then people probably would have played my shit. If you were playing, but like when you're sounding like low type shit, like meaningful stuff, and you're white, like you can't really. There's no white Rakim.
Yeah,
if that makes sense,
yeah.
Right. So there was this whole politics involved in that. This was a whole other thing where they were like, you can't ever let anybody know that you're white, or nobody will listen to the music, and let's make just a black cover with no picture of you. I mean, it just became, that's why I was just like, forget it, I'm never rapping again.
Yeah.
But and that's why I stopped. But so we ended up selling like the shirts out of our trunk that night. And then within short order, we landed in a national account. And the day that we landed our national account, we quit school in the middle of our senior year of college.
How were you able to juggle your alcohol addiction and then what becomes a cocaine addiction? I was a cocaine guy, and so I could really relate to a lot of the things you said. But you did a pretty good job of staying on course. I mean, I don't know what your personal life was like, but you continued to ascend in the industry you were in.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about alcoholics and addicts. We're perfectionists by nature. We're very high achievers, and then we crash shit down. All the stuff that we build, we crash shit down. So in the times that I was lucid, I was pretty good. I could grow things pretty big. I could, have a good gift of gab. I could talk about what I represent pretty well, what my company represents pretty well. But then as soon as the witching hour happens and I start drinking, I start slowly quickly picking away the very things that I built, which is kind of the story of my life until I got sober. I'd build up things and then I'd crash them down.
How do you end up back in New York?
So let's see. So I moved out to Los Angeles because we were putting products on celebrities. We were only as good as our ability to put product on celebrities. So at that time, it was like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Hanging with Mr. Cooper, In Living Color, Coolio, Dre was just coming out, Snoop, Warren G. Like it was like that time, right? And then we licensed our company to Samsung America, which is how I eventually met Damon from Fubu Shark Tank, to help scale our growth. And they're at 1430 Broadway, or 1431. And so I moved back, we did the deal, and then I moved back to New York. Yeah.
What's the nightlife situation like? I mean, clearly you have money, you're successful, you're entrenched in one of the most alluring industries on the planet.
Yeah.
So tell me, walk me through a day in the life.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. It's like I always spent whatever I had because it's like there was no money. It was like a bottle with a hole in the bottom of it that you pour and it never fills up. Like that's the best way that I could describe me. So like when cocaine came and then even on good things, I started a homeless foundation. And then I forgot to raise money for the homeless. So I'd take care of all the homeless guys. And I ended up spending millions of dollars taking care of my homeless guys, never thinking, oh shit, that's right. I set up a homeless foundation. I'm really supposed to raise millions of dollars, not spend the money that I worked for. And then when everything blew up, I had nothing. Right. So I never really had anything because everything was like, take 8-ball, take
robbing
alcohol,
Peter to pay Paul.
Strip clubs, take homeless, take, bring up my 5 friends here, let me help all my 5, 6, 7, 8 friends who are no longer around because the moment I didn't have money anymore, they had no use for me.
Yeah.
So, I never really had anything. I mean, it's just, it was always about more, either helping more people and never looking at my bank account, helping homeless, not looking at my bank account. And I was actually hurting the homeless more than I was helping them, meaning I was giving them money, which was so stupid in that first year. I was giving them money and then I realized later they were just taking the money and going downtown and copping drugs. So I was just leading them to a quicker death. Then I got smarter and started, buying them hotel rooms and, like hygiene and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then I would drink and I would just spend tons of money on strip clubs and debauchery.
Well, how are the people in your circle responding to your addiction? You're hanging out with people like Puffy and Dre and
I was never hanging out with Dre. I played ball with Diddy and his whole crew. He's obviously in a bad spot right now. But I always, I never hung out with those guys. I was too much of a what's the word? I just was not a sociable person. I was really bad to be around. Like the first time I met Damon's bodyguard, I picked a fight with him. And, his name is Grim Reaper. Like I picked a fight with him. And so I was just always I was that guy that no one wanted to be around. I always wanted to fight. So I remember like when I first met Diddy on the basketball court. And like, I guess because I'm white, he must have thought I was a stockbroker, right? So he's like, come on, baby. Like, because I was on my phone on the sidelines. He's like, stock market's closed, baby. And I had hip hop brands, right? And he hadn't even started his yet. So I was like, what the fuck makes you think that I'm a fucking stockbroker? Because I'm white? And he was about to start a hip hop line. And I was one of the original people inside of the hip hop, clothing line, game. So I just went after him. And then anytime we would play ball, he'd want to check me. And then I always like getting physical with people. I'm not going to say the word physical in Diddy.
I get it. Yeah. You already said that, Neil. You're good.
But I just wasn't a good guy. Just was not a good guy. I had so much rage inside of me.
What was the cocaine appetite like for you before we get into like your recovery? But like, it sounds like it was around the clock deal.
Yeah, it was I was an 8-ball a day guy. So I would buy 7.5 gram packets that my drug dealer had distributed in chiclet boxes. Like it's because when he would get arrested, he would check in his chiclet boxes, and they would never check that there was cocaine in there. I'd wake up. From the moment I woke up, I would do a blast. I actually started cocaine because I wanted to compete in business. And so I figured, like, Damon was doing a lot better than me in FUBU. And so I said, all right, well, if I can quadruple my cocaine uptake, I could probably work 21, 22 hours a day.
Which to an addict honestly makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then, what's interesting, I was talking about my cocaine and I forgot about the first real time that I took it. And it sums it up really well. So there was this guy, and I used to teach tennis because my parents used to send me to tennis camp to get me out of New York City. And I was teaching tennis with this guy, and he was like, hey, I got some cocaine, right? And he was obsessed with the movie Less Than Zero.
Yeah.
Like with Robert Downey Jr. was like the sexy part of Robert Downey Jr. when he was getting the girls.
Yeah, dude, I watched that movie 100 times. And active addiction, and that's the idiot in me. Like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah. And he was like, I want to be like Robert Downey Jr. I'm like, the part where he's dead and Duck a dick, or the part
for drugs. Yeah.
So I forget the guy's name, but he's like, you got to try cocaine. It's the best, man. And, you want to be like Less Than Zero, and Julian from Less Than Zero is I was like, okay. So we did it. And I guess we got a bad bag. So we're in the middle of teaching tennis, high on cocaine. And he looks over at me. He goes, I think the bag's laced and we're going to die. I was like, oh, and I was like, oh my God, like, you never told. He's like, it's never happened to me before. So here we are teaching tennis. He's like, I think I'm about to have a heart attack. And I was like, oh my God, maybe me too, right? It was the worst night of my life. We woke up in the morning, and when we saw each other the next day, we looked at each other at the same time. We were like, yeah, you want to do that again? Like,
yeah.
How crazy is that? That's the definition of insanity, right?
Yeah. And you are, and I like listening to you and what you have to say, because you're a 12-step guy.
Yes.
And there's a lot of different ways to get sober. I'm not here to, that's kind of why I started this podcast. Yeah. I just want people to be able to, if they're thinking about sobriety, to drop in and listen to what you have to say and hear the hope, right? And the powerful message that somebody like you has. When did you start to get an opportunity to flirt with recovery, right? I mean, we flirt with girls and it goes sideways. Like, recovery is way harder. Like, how did you get introduced to it, and what started to happen to you that maybe, because for me, there were seeds that were planted even before I got sober.
I mean, it was consequences. So I was going into AA meetings in the 90s because my friends were saying I was a lunatic and I needed help. So I'd check out some meetings. But then when I really started coming in was so I got arrested for knocking out two bouncers at Ricky's Cabaret.
The strip club.
On 3rd Street. Yeah. So I had a restraining order. What do you call it when you're not allowed to walk on that side of the block for a year or something? And so I woke up in a jail cell that night. That was a huge wake-up call. And then while I was on probation for assault, I woke up inside of a single cell. Turned out I was like, what did I do? Because I never knew what I did. They're like, well, you assaulted a police officer. And I was like, what? So I asked one of the correctional officers, police officers, to clean the mace out of my eye. And I said, I really want to apologize to the policeman that apparently I assaulted or went after a policeman last night. And he said, it was me. And he said, let me tell you something, kid. Like, if we had a videotape of last night and you saw the videotape of this animal that took like 5 of us and all this mace, to get into and I was huge. I was 270 pounds. I was a monster. I think you've probably seen the picture.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're the nicest kid in the world. You got a homeless foundation, like you got a business, like what's the matter with you? And I remember, so I got arraigned, and on the arraignment, my lawyer, who we couldn't afford, it was a favor of my father, a favor of a friend of my father's friend, right? The lawyer said, watch magic happen. And I got like 130 hours of community service sweeping the streets of Harlem. And that lawyer said, listen, that was like a miracle. But here's the thing. If you ever get in trouble again, don't ever call me, because there's nothing that I can do to help you. So, so now I was in trouble because I couldn't pick fights anymore. I literally was told I can't. But I had that anger and rage inside of me. So I started picking fights in bars. And then the only difference is this time I would put my hands behind my body. I'd go up to the biggest guy in the bar, I'd slap him in the face, and I'd wait for him outside, right? And then I'd say, you think you're a tough guy. I'd slap him in the face, and I wait for him outside. And then when you come outside, I would always just say the same thing. I want you to hit me harder than you ever hit anyone in your life, and I promise you hit like my grandmother. I always said that. I don't know why. And like 30% of the time, they'd be like, this guy's crazy. Let me leave. And then like 30% of the time, they take their swings, and I just do stupid again, and then 30% of the time they'd bring their 10 friends. And the last time I woke up in an intensive care unit. So with me, I had to find a solution. And the only solution I knew about was 12-step rooms that I had been told about. So I had started going to 12-step rooms during this whole process, starting in the early 2000s. I have a tattoo with an old sobriety date of 2004, never thinking that ink would keep me sober.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. And, I didn't drink and go to meetings until I drank. Like, I just didn't want to work the program. And that's why, like, as you mentioned, you're inclusive of anyone who chooses to live a sober life in whatever program that is. And we're that way in Lucid, not on the California sober side, but for me, I just wouldn't work the program, and I would invariably go out. And so I was introduced to AA, but I was in the rooms of AA for many, 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 many years until I was finally brought to my knees.
What brought you to your knees?
Yeah, so I was babysitting the 5-year-old son of an ex-girlfriend, and I passed out while babysitting him. And the thought of putting a 5-year-old in jeopardy, I couldn't look in the mirror. And so I didn't even count days this time around, because I couldn't even come into the rooms the first 100 days. I don't think I couldn't look in the mirror. I was so ashamed, because my ex and all of her friends were a bunch of kind of degenerates as well. Mm-hmm. High functioning 6-figure degenerates, I would call them. Right. So they make their money, and then they just drink and do cocaine all night. But all of those degenerates, they're like, couldn't believe that I put this kid in jeopardy. And so, like, when you can't hang out with the degenerates anymore, and you have no place to go, you're in real trouble. So I was fortunate enough to really hit bottom.
What starts to happen to you? And I appreciate you saying, like, you almost like white knuckle it for the first 100 days. And then you start to go into meetings. What happens? I see you open up when you start to talk about recovery. What starts to happen when you're going to these meetings and you're following suggestions?
Well, I mean, there was a very clear thing that happened this time that I try to have other people do or don't. It's just very yes or no. So I went in, I said the 3 words that no addict wants to say, which are the very 3 words that'll save your life. I need help. Right. And now I'd been going to this meeting for many, many years, and everybody knew I was fucking crazy, like lunatic. So I got a call from the sponsorship coordinator that night. He says, I have good news and bad news. The good news is I got you a sponsor. The bad news is he's not going to take any of your shit. And we all know you're full of shit. I got a call, and that sponsor, Jimmy the Rock, couldn't have been more opposite than me. He was an iron worker, union guy. And he cracked open the big book. We read the big book line by line. He had me used to say service keeps you sober. And it says it right in the big book. Nothing ensures immunity more than intent from alcohol, more than intensive work with another alcoholic. And so I started taking meetings with my grant sponsor into Rikers Island, into the jails, into the institutions, chairing really down and out last house on the block detoxes. So yeah, I went out. I became on fire with the program. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And so you're connecting with people within the fellowship, and what was that like to start to build relationships with other men in recovery? Because for me, that was like, I was lucky. I had a sponsor who took me through the big book in his house. We'd go line by line, right? He'd read a page, I'd read a page. And then we would talk about it. And then when it came time to do the work, I did the work, and then we would reconvene and go over that. It was a magical experience. And anybody that's listening to this, I know you have experienced this because I've heard you talk and I'm hearing you talk now. It's like an out-of-body experiment. It's amazing, And so there was a connection that I was forming through experiences like that I never thought I was worthy of. How did you, I guess, how was that experience for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's something that we read in this meeting that I go to once a week, says why we were chosen, which is this beautiful passage that talks about, I don't know, give us your sick, give us your weak, give us your disregarded, people. Like it's, when you connect with people who share that common bond, right? And this time who shared my common solution, because everybody in the room shares a common bond, but very few people share the common solution. The problem that I see right now is simply that, I mean, at the highest level, I'd say it's not that I'm doing anything unique. I'm working the program, right? To me, my experience is a 12-step program. I can't speak for any other programs. But it's tricky. There's a lot of booby traps, meaning like I used to do fellowship. And when I would do fellowship, I had lost everything. I didn't have a pot to piss in a window, throw it out. I moved back home, George Costanza style, with my parents at 41 years old. It was that bad.
Yeah.
So they would give me train fare to the 12-step meeting, and they give me $2 to like throw in the basket, and they give me $5 for fellowship, right? But a lot of times when I do fellowship, people would want to do like this whole, all right, everybody just toss in $30. And I was like sitting there with my $5 bill. So I felt incredibly uncomfortable because I couldn't participate in fellowship. Because, everybody wants to, sandwich, a pastrami sandwich at Jerry's Deli, and I can't order it. You know what I mean? So then I started like, oh my God, do I now not go to fellowship? And then someone really helped me and said, listen, I got you covered. Right. Yeah. That made me feel amazing. And then one day he said, hey, listen, my new girlfriend says she doesn't want me to pay for you. And then I was like, I never went to fellowship again.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So it's like, that's why like right now, when I see newcomers every day, it's interesting. Today I didn't go to a meeting. But normally I go at 7 a.m. Yeah. I normally go to a meeting every morning at 7 a.m.
No better way to start the day.
Yeah. And I see these newcomers feeling exactly as squirrely as I did. And so I immediately kind of meet them where they are because they don't know shit. They're like eyeing the Celsius drink that's $3 and way out of their financial reach. Like and I remember all that stuff. So it's like I try to get these people into the work as much as possible, right? Because the people that don't do the work don't survive.
What are some of the ways that you use to get through to these young guys? Like getting, an early recovery, helping them stay sober and helping them change their insides, which is the biggest, that's the miracle.
Yeah. What's interesting is Bill Wilson in the 12-step program, when he first started trying to help people, it wasn't working at all. And Dr. Silkworth, who was the doctor at the hospital, who it wasn't an alcoholic that was working with him, and you probably know this stuff, said, Bill, you're trying to smack these people over the head with the solution. They don't want to hear the solution. You need to hit them with the problem. And it may be how you identify with the problem. So because you're speaking on a pedestal. So I try to immediately go, to the problem and how I had the problem. And so I stop. I don't talk about them. I talk about me. Because they say, hey, how you doing? I'm struggling. Yeah, man, I was struggling too. Wait, what? Yeah. Like I go immediately just speaking about me, because the moment I try to speak about them, then it's this kind of holier than thou, mentality that I don't think anybody should hit people with. I think we need to identify. It's a program that you need to first identify with the people. That's why they put the stories in the back of the big book to kind of almost like Hebrew, that you read it backwards. They hook people in the back of the book to come into the front. I say, listen, if you want help, I'm willing to give it. Anything you need, if you're willing to go in any length, happy to help in any way that you want. Give them a hug.
How did it start to change you? Because now you're humble. So just hang in and take the compliment. You had several successful experiences in the business world that were derailed by addiction. So similar for me, like in our chosen industries or however you want to say it, I had burned a ton of bridges. And so, I had gotten sober before where, it didn't take, I wasn't ready, whatever you want to say. I didn't do the work. Like you said, that's what happened. So
yeah,
you start to get sober and then you get this fire in your belly and your self-esteem comes back. And now you're back doing what really you were probably created to do. Like, how did you find that gear? Because a lot of times people get sober and they're like, well, I'm never going to have fun, or I'm never going to be able to, work as hard as I did when I was doing an 8-ball a day. Like we have that euphoric recall. That's total bullshit. And it's a lie. Like, how did you work through all that stuff and build your way to starting a business from the ground up again?
Yeah. What's interesting is, I owe my recovery to something that happened, which was a negative thing, but it's probably the reason why I stayed sober and got sober and learned the program outside of that initial time that I told you about with my sponsor. And then when I would take meetings in, and I was really on fire with the program, but a lot of people fall off after that early kind of whatever, right? And they get on fire with the program, and then there's a saying, don't let the gifts of the program take you out of the program. So my father got sick. He had 6 strokes in 30 days in 2014. So I had to be at the hospital during that time. I could never go to an AA meeting anymore, month over month, 4 months. So I started, a friend of mine who's now my sponsor, he wasn't my sponsor then, told me to listen to a speaker tape. So I listened to the speaker tape. The first one that I listened to was Earl H. Then I listened to Chris H. Then I listened to Peter M. And I started to listen to thousands of speaker tapes while I was at my father's bedside. And I learned about like this, and not only the program, but how it was created, how the programs that were before this that didn't work, why this worked, why the traditions were put together, how this program almost fell apart, how they almost took the money from the Rockefeller. I learned everything, right? Not everything, but I learned a ton. And so I probably have listened to more speaker tapes than anyone I've ever met because my father was in the hospital. And so I was only because I was at his bedside, right? And I had nothing else to do. And so those speaker tapes, I now pass on to my sponsees all the time. I'm like, listen to this one and tell me what you learned tomorrow. And I'll send them something and they'll be blown away. Like I got some speaker tapes that are like, I mean, I need very hardcore 12-step type shit. Like I'm a very sick and suffering dude if I'm not working the program. I'm very intense, right? And so to me, I need to live in service. When I'm not in service, I'm not a good person. And so that's why with Lucid, as a vocation and an avocation, if I'm working in sobriety as a vocation and I'm working in sobriety as an avocation, I'm always surrounded. There's no separation to me. It's working in recovery, helping people, like period. And so to me, that's why I continue to get that fire lit. You see people, struggling all the time when you have a lot of people on a platform, and you can see a lot of good things happen, but you see a lot of bad things happen. 80% of people relapse.
Yeah. I've heard you talk about living in that state of vulnerability. Like that is empowering, right? As a sober person, rather than, the ego, which when that's running the show, I'm totally fucked. I mean, I'm waiting to it happened to me this weekend, like I come off like a successful experience and then somebody tells me something that I don't like to hear and I'm crushed. Like I can't, and that's being away from the program, right? I got to stay balanced. I got to stay in gratitude. When you start up Lucid, what, first of all, tell us about Lucid, tell us what it is and the environment it creates for people. Yeah.
I mean, Lucid, in aggregate, is about 207,000 people that have joined Lucid. It's split between people call it a sober Facebook's Lucid Sober Recovery Network, which is about 140,000 people, which is they talk about anything and everything sobriety. They post about their vulnerability. I'm struggling. I'm back on day one. I just relapsed. I have 10 years. I have 30 years. I just had this great mocktail. What do you think? It's like a sober Facebook. Sober tips of the day, daily gratitude. That's the biggest section. Recovery voices, which is episodes like you and I are having right now. There's like 50 of them. And so there's a whole community there. And then we launched Lucid Sober Dating April 28th of last year, and there's about 70,000 new members there.
What brought that? I mean, I can tell you, I couldn't talk to anybody when I first got sober. And and it was like, I went to rehab, then I lived in a recovery house. Then I lived with another dude who was a sober buddy. We lived in Jersey City. I would go to meetings in Hoboken like nonstop. And it was great. It would really helped me. But it took me a while, dude, till I was ready to start talking to girls and stuff. And honestly, that was perfect for me because that could have led me. My story is I did not go on a date till I was probably a year and a half sober. That's my story. That's not if I have a sponsee that's going to go on a date, I'll tell them my experience and I'll tell them what the book says, or the book doesn't even say that. It's like a recommendation, right? So so whatever.
Book doesn't recommend it. And that's the thing. Here's the thing. All my sponsees, I told them, don't drink. Don't drink. And, we don't want you to date for the first year, right? So if I were to tell someone, hey, you're going to get sober and you're going to keep it in your pants for a year, no one's getting sober, right? So if you are going to want to date, we want you to date in a sober in a safe and protective environment where the person isn't pressuring you to drink on the other side of the table. So we're not trying
to be who you are.
Yeah. And it's like, people aren't understanding, like, that's the first place that people go. They're like, oh, no drinking for the first year. First of all, where in the big book does it say that? Okay. So
no
if you're
dating.
a big book.
You said drinking, you meant say dating.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
No dating.
Yeah.
Right. But people don't even understand that, like, upwards of 30% of people, like, in the United States are getting sober. Right. And so, we have to make sure that we also want people to keep their recovery separate, meaning we don't want them dating in 12-step rooms and then they break up and then they're afraid to go back to their home group. There's a lot of problems there.
Yeah.
So we want to find ways to safely connect with other people, right? And of course, they pick that one little thing of someone mentioning in a meeting. And yes, of course, you want to focus on your sobriety at first, but we have to start encouraging. It was almost impossible for someone like me when I would be on the other side of the table and the woman drank. Oh my God, we don't drink. How are you going to have any fun? Can't you just have one drink? No, I can't. An hour later, I just feel horrible. Can you just have one just for me? Wouldn't give it up. Right. So a lot of my friends that didn't work in recovery, right, and work the program so hard, relapsed over it.
Yeah.
Because they really were going out with people that were giving that social pressure on the other side of the table. And so with Lucid, we wanted to create not just a sober recovery network, but we also wanted to give a safe place for people to connect and engage, because social anxiety is one of our biggest problems.
That's why I drank. I drank because I'm an alcoholic, but it was a huge elixir for me to literally talk to people that I was scared to talk to.
So think about if you're single and you're sober and the woman is like, just have a drink. All you want to do is drink to get out of that anxiety.
Yeah.
And so it's very deadly. A lot of my friends aren't around because, like, they relapse and they're not here anymore. So we wanted to come out with, a place where people can can safely connect. And that's why we created the dating side, because of my experience and my experience with all my friends who had the similar challenges.
How does it work? Like, somebody goes on there and you connect. Like, how does it walk me through the process?
Yeah, it's like any of the other dating platforms, but it's for sobriety. So it's like you connect, it's free, right? If they want to pay for an elevated level of service, you do that, boosts and all that kind of stuff. It's crazy as a business guy. It's like, we want, in a perfect world, we just give everybody everything for free.
Yeah.
Here, just give everything for free, right? And it's like, people don't understand that, like, somehow businesses need to be able to survive. So on average, 80 to 90% of people will use a platform free. 12 to 15% will pay for it and subsidize those other people. Yet the people who want it for free are complaining that it's not free when it really is free, but they just can't. You know what I mean? And it's like, listen, I'm keeping this shit free. And the people who could,
that's a great point. Yeah.
And it's like,
the people who aren't even paying are the ones complaining. And the people who are paying aren't saying anything.
Yeah. It costs money. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. There's a paywall. Okay. Click the X. Gone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so, and on Lucid, the community side, we have one premium, which is like a day-by-day, like, sober mentor. It's an amazing technology that we built that just is like a 365-day little mentor, $20 or whatever a month. But now we're building a whole gift of, it's called SAM, SAM, Sobriety and Addiction Mentor. And now we're building a program for those people that want to give the gift of SAM to people who can't. afford that $20 because though addiction doesn't discriminate, access to care does. Treatment centers are 50 grand a month. Even though we're $20 a month, some people can't afford that $20, but we're pairing them with people who can. So we're doing everything we can to help. But there's always motherfuckers that want to, yeah.
What are I love it. I love the New York and you coming out. I love it. So
yeah.
How about some of the, just a couple more things you've touched on, I've heard you say that I want to get to before I let you get back to your day. I know you're busy. You told an amazing story about, and it really it was something I related to a lot, where you tell your sponsees, or you did, hey, look in the mirror, give yourself an affirmation. And then walk me through that story. Yeah.
Well, so I tell them to go, and I got to tell these new kids to do that. I haven't done it to them yet. Go in and to the mirror and say, I love you. I'm proud of you. Right. And when they do it, like, oh my God, I feel so much better. Oh my God, thank you. What happens when you do it? I was like, okay, good. You did it. That's great. You feel better. They're like, yeah, well, what about you? I was like, yeah, I don't say that to myself. Right. Like, it doesn't apply to me. And of course it's, I'm being a hypocrite and it does, but it's one of my greatest assets and one of my greatest liabilities is like, I'm a beast when it comes to, there's a saying, if anybody treated us the way we treated ourselves, we'd fucking kill them.
Yes.
And like, I am a highly competitive person in every area that you can imagine. But I'm most competitive with myself. And it's something that I need to work on. I don't give myself credit for a thing, like nothing. I go out and try to help. And with that, it helps me. But I'm not good at the getting in the mirror shit. I can get in the mirror to comb my hair, but
you look great.
Yeah.
How about the Tom Brady Jr. Thing that you shared? Like, just mention that, and because I wanted to re-summarize it for you, but I already forget, and it's pretty awesome.
About emotional sobriety.
Yeah.
So when my father was sick, one of the tapes that I heard, his name was Tom Brady Jr., no relation.
Yeah.
And he talked about emotional sobriety, and emotional sobriety is where we need to live, right? And talked about Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, was in his 23rd year of sobriety. He was very depressed and he didn't know why. And it turned out that he was people pleasing. He wanted validation from others in order for him to feel good, right? So the way that he explains emotional sobriety compared to emotional inebriety is, if the way that you feel people think about you is the way that actually people do think about you, then you're emotionally sober. But if the way that you think, right, people think about you is not, true, that's emotional inebriety. So like a good example would be and where that comes from is self-hate. And this is a journey from self-hate to self-love. And it's a journey from the head to the heart, right? And so how do we get from self-hate to self-love? And he talks about, he's like, what happens when I stubbed my toe the other day? I said, you stupid motherfucker. Like, who does that? Like, you automatically go there, right? Like, what does stubbing your toe have to do with you being a stupid motherfucker? We just immediately go there. And until we have complete acceptance of who we are, we cannot have any freedom in our lives. And that's where the entire journey is, from that pain to that freedom. And so how do we stay emotionally sober? One of my favorite books is Non-12 Step is is Four Agreements. It's 2 books, Four Agreements and The Untethered Soul. And Four Agreements is like the simplest book you can read in an hour. But, be impeccable with your word. Don't make assumptions. Don't take anything personally, and try your best. Those are the 4. I don't know if that's the exact order, but the first 3 are not attainable perfectly. So in a day period, can I go a day without taking anything personally? I don't think I've gone a day.
Yeah.
Right. Have I gone a day or 2 days without making an assumption? Probably not. Unless I was in bed sick all day, I'm making assumptions. I bet I wonder if he thinks that I didn't call him because of that, so the only thing we can do perfectly is try our best to do the other 3. Right. So the question is, how can you do the best you can not to take things personally? Right. Just stupid shit that happens all the time. Someone comes up to me, I'm working on a machine a couple of weeks ago, working out. And the person's like, "You done?" I'm like, "No, I have a couple more sets." The guy walks away, right? Starts talking to his friends. I'm thinking, oh, he's probably saying, "Oh, what a fucking asshole. He should have told me." This guy
welcome to my brain
talking
too.
about like some girl.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh shit, maybe should I go up to him and say, "I'm sorry, did you want to work in? I have 7 more sets and I'm doing them supersetting, but if you want," and this guy already forgot about me. So it's like, how do we get into that stage where we're not in this consistent yearning for validation? Yeah. And it's this beautiful talk for your listeners. Tom Brady Jr. Emotional Sobriety. Just put it in Google. And it's this beautiful talk. And this is kind of my whole aspiration, to always live in emotional sobriety. And I fail short every day.
Yeah, but you do an amazing job of carrying the message. And
Thank you.
I love what you're doing. I love Lucid. I just kind of love your whole deal. So, and we'll put a link to Lucid in the show notes, right? Anything else you want us to trumpet about what you're doing?
No, I mean, I just, the main thing is if anybody doesn't really is kind of getting into sobriety for the first time and you don't know what to do, and you're kind of have that kind of block inside of where you don't really feel like saying those 3 words that'll save your life because they're so hard. I need help. Understand that, we all had day 1, right? And as we've been trained, the only way for us to keep it is to give away what was freely given to us. And so you would be shocked out of your mind when you say those 3 words and ask for help, what the response is going to be. And if you don't believe it, reach out to me, reach out to you, and I'm sure we can point that person in the right direction.
MJ, you're the best, dude. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, it was great. It was great to be here.
Dude, I feel better. So that's always a great sign.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for listening to the Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.